Hey everyone, Chad Hasty here, host of the Chad Hasty Show, which airs weekday mornings 8:30 to 11 a.m. Central Time on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Well, if you're a U.S. citizen and you have any plans to travel to Cuba anytime soon, I've got some bad news for you. President Trump expected to lay out a new Cuban plan on Friday. This in a nod to Senator Marco Rubio, who helped craft some of the language. Reading from Politico, making good on a campaign pledge, President Trump Friday will announce significant rollbacks of former President Obama's accord with Cuba by clearly banning tourism travel to the island, restating the importance of the 56-year-old trade embargo with the island, and instituting a broad prohibition on financial transactions with companies significantly controlled by the communist government's military, according to a draft version of the directive obtained by Politico. The administration says its goal is to put an end to the business transactions that financially benefit the Castro regime while putting the Cuban people while the Cuban people get little in return. Trump saying in the draft speech that my administration's policy will be guided by key U.S. national security interests and solidarity with the Cuban people. The draft of a 5.8-page presidential policy reads, I will seek to promote a stable, prosperous, free country for the Cuban people. To that end, we must ensure the U.S. funds are not channeled to a regime that has failed to meet the most basic of requirements for a free and just society. Well, I go back and forth on this embargo for Cuba. The United States, we come out and we say that, hey, we want to have this embargo because we don't want to help out the Castro regime which goes and beats its own people, jails its own people, commits horrible atrocities of human rights, and they do. But we also give money to Saudi Arabia. We have no problem with the Saudis. We sell military weapons to Qatar or Qatar, depending on which one you want to say. And we have a lot of relationships when it comes to China, and China doesn't exactly have the best human rights record either. The U.S., a little hypocritical at times when it comes to Cuba, the little communist island just off our shores, 90 miles away from Florida. I get the history. I understand it. I understand that the Cuban government, no friend of the United States, but the Cuban embargo really hasn't worked to improve anything on the island. It's continued to hurt people on the island, just like the Castro regime has. I don't know the full answer. I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but it seems like opening up the island to U.S. interest would make sense in the long run. What I didn't like about President Obama's trade with Cuba was basically Cubans didn't have to do anything. The Cuban regime must show that they can improve on their human rights record. The Cuban regime must stop locking up free people. The Cuban regime must change at some point. However, I think going back and telling U.S. companies they can't do business in Cuba is not the best way to go. We'll see what happens. I'm sure U.S. businesses will not be happy with the Trump administration on this one, but it is a campaign promise that President Trump made, and it is also something that Senator Marco Rubio and a lot of other Republicans, including a lot of Republicans in Florida, have championed going into this presidential year. So the rollback on what President Obama did, not shocking at all. But it's something that I'm not sure will benefit the American people or the Cuban people in the long run. Tune in to the Chad Hasty Show weekday mornings 8:30 to 11 a.m. Central Time. News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. You can also follow me on Twitter. Chad Hasty Radio. Have a great day.